everyone, and it's a brief history of everything, and we are back. And when I say we are back, I mean both of us. Thomas.
Hello.
You're alive.
I'm alive. Returned.
So he was
after a brief stay away.
He was off in one of those sort of, deep dark Africa, like the British explorers. The ones
Joseph Conrad kept it very.
The ones who went away for years and years and years, but never found anything, but demanded more money sent from home.
Similar to Marx.
That was exactly what, like Engels. Dear comrade, we need to crush the capitalist system, but we can't do this without your fortune. Please give us more money. No, so we are back, and we are back not for a one episode. We're back, and this is what we're going to talk about. We've got plans, big plans,
tremendous plans, so strong plans,
bigly huge, and we don't need to say that anymore. We can move past that. Interestingly enough, if you're interested in that, by the way, my last episode that I put out by myself, which was a history of impeachment, is still valid. So go back and listen to it. What we're going to get into, however, together is, we originally planned it as about a 7-episode arc, and it's already out past that. What we're referring to as the American half-century. So the American half-century is sort of our way of defining post-World War I, and we're going all the way through to Nixon and Watergate. That's sort of how we're viewing this.
Yeah, I think when Chris and I sat down to examine what we could rebrand a shorter or longer now series of episodes about, we are very familiar with the notion of an American century. We both got to thinking, where does that century really begin? And we found that we probably had a bit of an agreement that once Europe starts to fall away and America starts to ascend in the wake of World War I, that would be a logical starting point. And then where does the glory of that first half century come to an end? Well, it would be in the infamy of Richard Nixon.
Which, again, is a past episode in the archives. Feel free to go check that one out too. I love being able to do this. It's great. So pre and post-production. But no, we decided that together when we looked at it, realistically, in terms of a global sphere, World War I is regarded as America's stepping out point with regards to that. And Nixon's regarded as sort of the tail end of that exceptionalism.
Golden years almost.
Yeah, because that's when you start getting the American government being questioned a lot more. That's when you start seeing faith in a lot of the democratic principles in the United States starts to fall away a little bit, and people just start asking more and more questions. A process that begins really through that 60s era, but finishes with Nixon kind of deals at a lovely hammer blow with Watergate. So we sort of decided that we're going to break it into 2 different sets. So we're going to have what we're going to refer to as minisodes. Now, the minisodes will be either Thomas or myself, one of us probably, just doing a bit of an overview about what was happening at the time before we get into the eras we're going to talk about in particular.
Yeah, so to begin the series, there's going to be a need for some rapid grasping of background knowledge here. That while Chris and I, and certainly most of the listeners, could just jump in and start talking about America between the wars, to understand the sort of undercurrents that are at play, it's probably best to step back and understand, why is World War I a significant factor at all in America? Or why is it that America is retreating from the world stage after literally just saving the world stage? And what has happened before what it is that we're talking about? So the original idea was to use these mini episodes as a way of providing background knowledge that if you already had it, skip the episode.
Exactly. So the mini episodes will come out just before we do the main episode. Sometimes there'll be one to give you a heads up before our first main episode. There's 3.
A lot of background.
A lot of background. We're starting the series. So we're starting off with, again, as Thomas indicated there, the US and World War I, and that's sort of going to be the background that we're going to sort of paint for you. Our first episode is going to look at 1919 to 1928, which we're referring to as the business of America, which historians or people interested in history listening to this will automatically get the reference that we're making there as well. And that'll look largely at the end of Woodrow Wilson, in more ways than one, realistically. Who are we kidding? Then into the Republican-dominated 20s, and we're looking at the run of Harding into Coolidge, and then eventually at the tail end of that first episode into the election of Herbert Hoover. And then Hoover gets a large part of his own episode in episode 2. But we're sort of going to run through that first phase, 1919 to 1928, the roaring 20s, the prosperous 20s. You can put a large question mark next to the word prosperous. We're going to discuss that as well.
Yeah. Their main bent will be towards the sort of political forces at play, more of a traditional narrative there. But certainly Chris and I have our own pet passions in that era. We were just talking about how is it that the temperance movement at all manages to hold sway over millions of Americans? How do these social movements sort of grow out of the situation?
How does a president die and no one notices? Those sorts of things, which are fascinating, just fascinating moments, and names that you're going to see pop up across the American pantheon. The Cabot Lodge name is very prominent in this era. For what sort of reasons? Well, you'll find out when we get into it a bit more. But I think it's a fascinating period, and one that's under-discussed out of the simplicity of boom leading to bust.
Yeah. I think there's also a bit of a trap for most of the narratives to be distilled down into sort of very simple explanation as well. And we want to try and pull back a little bit of those assumptions that are occurring there, and maybe look at some of the historical trends that are going on with historians today as they themselves revisit the Roaring Twenties or the Great Depression or the New Deal or anything like that, and start to look at the questions people are asking now in a newer context about those historical moments.
Yeah, you will see a lot of themes that pop up, especially in the 1920s, that are very common and very relatable to rhetoric we've heard in the modern era. And it's stuff that you can sort of see the track that goes on there, and that goes back down to that idea of some people arguing history cyclical versus, looking at the different schools of history too. So it gives us a lot of scope to have a lot of really good conversations. And one bit of feedback that I've seen a lot of is that people like it when we have these sort of deeper conversations on history, and that's sort of what we're aiming to be able to bring back. And we figured that this era, and we're going all the way through to Nixon, so you've got a lot of conversation pieces we're going to be able to have there. And I think that will be something that a lot of people can get into. And we openly encourage you as well with every episode to sort of post comments and get back involved and sort of let us know how you're viewing it and how you're listening to it as well. And things that you're interested in, because we might do a mini episode or two if you've got questions that come off things, where we can do a mini episode and sort of catch up on some of those questions if we haven't got them down to be answered in future episodes.
Oh, yeah, by far we're going to have to miss things. I mean, each event itself could be an episode covering 10 years in an hour and a half, or two.
To give people an idea, at the moment scheduled, there are 9 mini episodes plus the 7 normal episodes. Yeah. Plus, we've already talked about off the back of this 3 other episodes. So we're looking at a fairly decent run here, and so we are going to have to miss things because there's so much scope. So we can always throw in extra episodes if you've got extra questions that you've like answered.
Yeah.
So we're more than happy to do that. But in the meantime, we're just more than happy to be back.
100%.
It's been really good. Thank you for the feedback that I got on the couple of episodes that I threw up in the meantime. Some really good feedback on my little bit that I did on Vietnam and the little bit that I did on the impeachment. Obviously, COVID's been interesting for everybody. And finding time has been tricky, really tricky. So hopefully we'll be able to sort of get back to what we love doing.
Back to normalcy.
Just back to normalcy. Again, that's something else you're going to hear a lot about. So with that in mind, just a little bit of an introduction and a bit of a, hey, welcome back, and glad to be back, and glad to hear back from everyone. So we will catch you all on the flip side.
Bye-bye.